Welcome to Checking In With. My name is Dennis Cahlo.
My name is Bethany Watson.
And today on the show, I am very excited, Bethany, because we have an illustrious guest.
Yes, we do.
We have someone who has been on TV for a very long time on the show Ghost Hunters and many other shows. He is also a death metal drummer.
Hell yeah.
Cat dad.
Yes.
Now author.
Yes.
Of an amazing book called A Life with Ghosts, right here. And his name is Steve Gonsalves. Steve Gonsalves, welcome to the show. Welcome to Checking In With. Thank you for checking in with me and Bethany today.
Welcome.
Hey, thank you very, very much. It's great to be here. That was an awesome intro. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. By the way, we're thrilled to have you because we are both big fans of the paranormal, big fans of Ghost Hunters. We loved The House in Between.
We've watched it twice.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, we've watched it twice. And we watched the sequel twice as well. We absolutely adore that movie. I think it's such an emotional roller coaster, and it's so beautifully shot and directed. And yeah, it's just one of my favorites, one of our favorites.
Yeah.
Thank you very, very much. Those people are really awesome over there. Alice is an absolute dreamboat of a lady, and the whole team over there is really, really cool. So thank you. Yeah.
There seems to be a very deep emotional core to all of your work outside of Ghost Hunters. I think within Ghost Hunters as well, but especially with this book and with The House in Between, you know, there's a very human element to all of it, even though it's dealing with the paranormal. So is that something that you like doing in expressing through the work and through paranormal investigating?
Yeah, that's a great question. Absolutely. That for me, when I first started investigating, you know, it was very much the pursuit of that experience and that evidence, and very much helping clients and people that were looking to me and to us for advice and help. But it didn't come until much later where you realize, like, oh my goodness, there's a whole other side to this. These people and stories, they stick with you. You know, I think about little girls and you know, adult men, all these people that went through this terrible trauma and tragedy, and you know, it does stick with you. As I just mentioned, that we had a case. It was a young girl where she, you know, they think maybe she took her own life, or maybe she just, you know, passed away in her sleep. The cause of death it remains inconclusive. And, you know, there was a chance we were maybe communicating with her, you know, and you think about that, gosh, this is a 14-year-old, and you read some of her, you know, pages in her diary where she says things like, you know, I'm not worth living, and things like that. And you're just like, ooh, you know, and you think about those things for years and years and years. So there is a whole, you know, I guess a humility side to it that I didn't quite realize how deep it was. That's a good question.
Oh, thank you.
I love the finger wag. Well done, Dennis.
Sorry.
You need a foam finger for that one. You know, you got something there.
I just realized I shook my finger.
Yeah.
No, but in a good way.
And you know, and before I hand it over to the wonderful Bethany, no, it's great.
It's
Please
really
don't
funny.
apologize. I'm Italian, so I wave my fingers all the time.
Big
you know,
hand
I'm like
gestures.
big hand gestures, a lot of hand motions.
Yeah.
So
God.
to sort of piggyback on that, we talk a lot about it. The main podcast called The Check-In. Bethany and I talk about our relationship. We talk about mental health. Obviously, you're up late. You know, you're not in normal human hours most of the time. You're dealing with cases that have a lot of trauma. Do you embrace mental health outside of this? Do you have to, you know, talk to someone and say, like, I need to cleanse my own mind of this after I've helped, like, cleanse this home?
Yeah. How do you take care of yourself?
Yeah.
That's wow. Another great question.
Good question.
You got to wag the finger, though. Now the rules in this episode is
God.
Steve, you must wag your finger at us.
That is actually a very good question. You know, never anyone professionally, you know, but there are times when we do talk to each other, you know, about things and just check in with each other and make sure that it's not too heavy or because it does weigh on people. Most investigators I know, they do have a bit of a hard time dealing with the darker side, and not darker in terms of demons, but darker in terms of tragedy and just things that most people don't ever want to think about going through. But there is another side to it, and I do touch on it just a little bit in the book, but it's not every, you're likely always dealing with a death, unless it's something that was never once in human form, something else. Um, but sometimes it's not, I died for these awful reasons or through these awful means, or sometimes it's, oh, I really just wanted to finish this for my wife, or
Mm.
I've been waiting for my husband to return, it can be loving things, and it can be meaningful things. It doesn't always have to be death, and sadly, 90% is,
Yeah.
Part of the business. Yeah.
right. But as a lover of dark history, that's fine with me, quite
Yeah.
honestly.
Well, we mentioned that you're a cat dad, and we are also cat people. But in animals in general, and speaking of lighter things, you talk in your book about a haunted zoo and saying that not all hauntings have to be, sad and dour and traumatic. Can you touch a little bit on the zoo that you talk about in the book?
Yeah, that case was awesome. You could tell how much you're talking about the Alexandria Zoo that's
Yep.
in Louisiana. Yeah. The gentleman who we think was haunting at that place, his name was Les, I believe. I could be completely way off, but I do believe that was his name. But you could tell, honestly, when we got there, how much the staff loved him and missed him and wanted him to still be around, and how much he wasn't looked at as, I own this zoo and you do what I want. These animals, he really looked at himself as doing something right by the animals, and really trying to give them the best care that he could, and to learn. And really, he wanted to. And he passed before he could, bring all of that, to fruition. And there's a good chance that we may have, contacted him. And if you've seen, that particular case that we did, not that every story in the book is, a case that we did on the show, but this particular one we did. And it affected everybody, not just me. But when you see the looks on their faces and the tears when they're saying, "Wow, you really, that was my, it really does mean quite something." And that, I don't think, was a haunting of death and trauma. I think that is, hey, I didn't get to finish what I was doing. I'm sticking around, and I might miss you guys too.
Oh, yeah.
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 So it's not necessarily, of course, there is some, sadness to that as well, but for lack of a better word, it's more maybe a romantic sadness, if you will. But, it's not always, someone who really was in a dire strait, but, yeah.
Yeah, there's some happiness there. I love that.
And some heart,
Yeah.
like a lot of people don't realize that, like you said, not all hauntings are this ooky spooky kind of thing. It's like sometimes there's an underlying emotional quality to it, where someone wants to finish the shelf they were building for their wife, or the home, or it was the child's favorite toy, and so it's just sort of returning to those places that made you feel comfort. Now, speaking of comfort, we tend to, and this is a cat question, so we're going off ghosts for a second.
Yeah, are you open to speaking of cats?
Are you open to speaking of
Are you
cats?
kidding me? Please.
For those
Yes.
only listening, Steve just rubbed his hands together
Yeah.
as though preparing for a good
Yeah.
cat question.
So you have Fleur, your cat, yes?
That's right. Yes.
And she
Yeah.
looks to be a what,
She a
Bethany?
Maine Coon or Norwegian forest cat?
More closer to a rag doll. I did rescue her. Not that I, jumped in a river, but from a from a shelter And they said that their best guess, and same with the veterinarian, is she's either is or very close to a rag doll. Yeah.
Have you tried that thing where you lay her on her back and she goes totally submissive?
Oh yeah, all the time, all the time. Yeah, she does it and waits for me to come by. Here I am.
We too have a rag doll, so we have a Persian rag doll. So it's very like, yeah, we'll just kind of lay her on her back sometimes, and it's like you can't move genetically, you can't move, so we're just gonna like take advantage of the scratches.
So we like to see ourselves as strong-willed people who don't have a lot of hang-ups, you know, but we have to bring our cat wherever we go. So do you bring her with you when you're doing a lot? You do a lot of traveling. How much traveling would you say you do within a year?
It's different for it'll be kind of like a few years in a row. We'll be going, 8 to 10 months, I'd say, traveling.
Man. Yeah.
And then some years, just a few months. But there was a good stretch of time, I'd say maybe a good 10 years where it was, 9, 10, 11 months a year. And then, we get a little older, a little wiser. We're like, what are we doing to ourselves? Slow down.
So do you bring her with you? What do you do?
How do you walk away from your cat?
I wouldn't be able to walk away from that little squishy squish.
No.
It is pretty hard. Sorry, I keep looking at her. She's very
baby.
I love that she's right next to you. Yeah.
This guy's so uninterested. He won't even look at it.
There's a better interview on the floor. You're like, I'm going to talk to those guys.
No, I don't get to bring her with her. My mom will come by and my parents and feed her, give her little rubs and stuff. If I'm gone for say I know I'm going to leave for 2 months or 3 months, I'll bring her to their house and they'll watch her for me. So she has people around. Yeah,
that's nice.
I make sure she's taken care of. I don't bring her with me. I feel like it might not be that healthy for her, maybe. I'm not sure. Maybe a lot of anxiety.
You travel, yeah.
It's weird. Our cat, we just put her in the car. We do a lot of road trips, so we'll just put her in the car and she falls asleep.
She's fine.
She's the sweetest little.
She's fine. She's great.
Yeah.
What kind of cat you said? I'm sorry.
She's a half Persian, half ragdoll.
Yeah.
Okay.
She only got one eye.
Yeah.
And about 4 teeth total. Maybe.
4 teeth total. She is, she runs our life.
She's held together with duct tape, basically. She's like a mess.
She's held together with Band-Aid, toothpicks, and duct tape, we say.
Oh, no.
So speaking of traveling and younger versus getting older, Dennis and I have this issue where we are about to probably going to head into a shoot for a project, which will do a lot of night shoots. And we are more daytime people. And going to bed, anytime past 10 for me is like a real struggle. So how do you work overnight, stay awake all night, not feel nauseated while you're doing it, and then the next day not feel like you're going to die?
That's a great question. Luckily for me and most investigators I know, that's the hours that we sort of keep. So it's already in us. So it doesn't become very difficult, but there are times when, you will have to stay up until 4, 5, 6, even later in the morning and expected to be up or somewhere at, 10 or 11 in the morning. And those are the days that can be a little tricky. Lots of coffee, lots of naps. Make sure you're, coffee, naps, vitamins.
Okay.
Those would be the 3 for most investigators. Yeah. I know if they need that, it'll be coffee, naps, maybe for some a Red Bull, but I go for coffee or tea or something. Actually, I don't know why I said tea. Never tea.
Tea is awful.
Coffee.
Tea is
Sorry,
disgusting.
no offense to tea drinkers. I don't even know why I said it. Maybe once I have.
That's okay. You know what? I'm going to wag my finger at you.
Yeah,
Steve, how dare you speak about tea on this podcast?
It's disgusting. Yeah, that's good to know because it is something that Nighttime, I'm envious of people who are nighttime people, because I feel like so much cool spooky stuff happens in the night that I miss, because I am a crack of 6 a.m. person.
Yeah, we go to bed early, and then she kind of ruined me. I used to be in a band, so like, and we'll talk about you being in a band as well soon, but I used to be in a band, so I toured, so like I used to like go to bed really late every night, or early
like
in the morning,
sleeping with ladies,
all right,
all over the place, like staying up late, being all sorts of band membery.
All right.
So,
don't upsell me that much, Bethany. So like I got used to it, but then I meet this one, and she's like, I'm going to bed, and it's like 8 o'clock at night. I'm like, what? And then I got used to it. Yeah. So she kind of roped me into it.
Ruined him.
But now that we've gotten all that sort of settled, I want to take it now all the way back. And I want to talk about the Light Bright. So the Light Bright is a very special story. This was the one this was your first experience, yes, with communicating or communing?
Like a paranormal event. Is that right? Your friend's Light Bright?
Wow. That's a good, for a second, because I don't really ever tell that story. I didn't know even if you were talking to me there.
Well, no, we have this Light Bright right here, you see.
Yeah. I was like, them too? At the time, I didn't know it. It's not like that's what we were doing or what was happening. To me, I just remember, where did you even hear this? Where did you
were
even
on a
know
podcast.
Okay,
you did a podcast where I think it was 2 women with beautiful long hair, and you told the story, and it stuck with me, because the Light Bright is such a tactile memory, I think, for a lot of us, and so it stuck with me.
Yeah,
if you're comfortable talking about it, I certainly don't want to.
No, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I just remember was on the floor with a friend of mine. We were kids, young. Obviously, we're playing with a Light Bright, and I just remember hearing like these sounds, like, and I didn't know. I was like, oh, whatever, I'm a little kid, but And then I saw, I don't know how to explain it, but saw a few of them kind of like fling off the rug and hit the wall.
God damn.
I don't know. It happened. And I didn't, for some reason, I didn't even think that much of it. I was just like, I don't know. It didn't even kind of register. Yeah. But then I remember my friend started crying, and I was like, so what's she crying about? Just not understanding. But then I remember her parents coming over and just saying to me, okay, it's time to call your mom, time to go. And her parents like picked her up and were like, it's okay. Her name is Jamie. She's like, it's okay, Jamie. It's okay, Jamie, it'll stop soon. Don't worry. And they're like, okay, Jamie has to go to bed now. You need to call your mom or whatever. And it wasn't until now, fast forward, I'm a teenager, and we're on the phone one day, and she's like, you remember what used to happen to me when we were kids, right? I was like, with the Light Bright? She's like, yeah, my whole house was haunted. They used to like mess with me all the time. And she was like, and I was like, that's really what was happening.
Wow.
So in retrospect, it was an experience, but at the time I didn't quite know it was. Even now looking back, maybe something was misinterpreted, maybe something with static. Those little plastic things are pretty light. I don't know. Your brain wants to make sense of it, but at the time I saw those little things, bing, 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 and it hitting the wall behind me. And she started crying, and I was like, "Oh, what's her problem?" And
it's crazy. Like, it's crazy that it was such a thing that the parents were just aware of it, and it clearly happened all the time. How bizarre!
Yeah. I remember the exact words, like, don't worry, it'll stop soon, or it'll be over soon. And I remember being like, what?
It gave me chills.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's like they know, they've been living with it, you know? So they're like, oh, this is just the thing that happens. It's like when a light flickers in your house, you're like, that's just that. If you turn on the dishwasher, that's going to happen. But for people who live with hauntings and with spirits in the house, they're like, that's just him or her or them. They're going to eat for a little while and then they're going to leave, which I always found fascinating. And one thing that you said, which was interesting, that I always think about when I think about paranormal investigating, man, my tongue is tied between my teeth today. Paranormal investigating,
you got it,
is that a lot of it, and a lot of what you don't see on the heavily edited television shows, which of course you have to do. You can't just like do an 8-hour, 10-hour show, is debunking what might be environmental. And so, how much would you say that you go around and like while you're doing an investigation, going, okay, that's just that light, like that's just this. And do you have any special sort of readers or anything besides the EMF readers and the tech that's goes to say, well, wait, this might be environmental, and is that something that you enjoy doing? Like going, I know what this might be. Let's see if it's that first, and if it's not, let's move on to the next thing.
That's the way we investigate. At least I do. I know, my closest investigating companions, Jay, Tango, even Amy, Adam, everybody that Dustin, we try to get to the bottom of things before we will consider something paranormal. I know Jay and I, Tango for sure. He's very much not into anything if it's not, but it's not because we don't want it to be. We
Right.
most certainly, usually we do. There are times when 100% I've looked at Jay and he's been like, I don't want this to be a ghost because then the client's terrified, or it's going to mess with the family, or now they're going to want to move out of their house because of so there is a weight to, you also don't want to jump to things too quickly because
Sure.
You're dealing with people who might sell their business, that might sell their house, that might move out of their family house because you're telling them that there are all these things happening. So you do want to be quite certain that what you're finding is, at least in your eyes, legitimate phenomena. And not that people are always lying, but you can misinterpret things. You really can. Your eyes can play tricks on you. It really does. Your brain can imagine things being there when they're not. And it's a fact. It's a fact that it can happen to everybody. You don't have to be shifty in the brain for it to happen to you. It happens to everybody. There are marathon runners who hallucinate all the time because they're exerting their body so much. There's a famous story where a marathon runner saw a rabbit, tell him, come on, you're almost at the finish line, And it wasn't until her husband told her, like, there's no rabbit. And like, so things can happen. And you just honestly want to be sure. And, it was really, like Jason in the early days, when I joined up with him, that was like, hey, and he would always say, and Grant as well, but I remember mostly Jay, I think about 80% of what we experience can be disproved, or not what we experience, of what, they're saying, or the experiences of the people out there. And about 20% would be actual phenomena. And, through all of our time investigating, I'd say that does hold true. It's about, I think you can get to the bottom of about 80% of the claims and stories, and about 20% could be an actual, even in the actual haunt itself. You could be in a place that is haunted, and there's a slight chance that 80% of what is experienced, because maybe they had one or two legitimate awesome experiences, but now they're on edge, so they attribute all kinds of things to the ghost. So even at a place that is legitimately haunted, he's rubbing off on me. I'm just kidding.
It's me. It's me. It's the Italian rubbing off on everyone.
You guys are fun. Thank you. So I think that holds true. And again, I don't think everybody's making things up, but
no, of course not.
You can misinterpret things. You can, most of the people we're dealing with, they're not investigators. It's not their job to figure it out. They just go, that thing fell. Oh, it's the ghost that I saw 2 months ago. They're attributing. It's not their job to figure it out. They're just scared. That's our job. So I don't fault anybody for that. But I do think you have to be sure. And then there's the whole skeptic side of it, the whole science side of it, the whole presenting things as evidence. If a newspaper is asking you about a case, or some, media, you want to present evidence, or even in a lecture, or even back to the client, because your evidence will go into their, historical tours. It'll go into things like that. So you need to be really, really certain that what you're saying and what you're putting forth could be legitimately paranormal.
And I think that there's the desire also to weed out what isn't paranormal, so that what is can more strongly stand on its feet. Because you can say to people, no, we tried this, it wasn't that. You know, the shelf wasn't uneven, there was no condensation, the glass was sturdy and dry, and then it fell off.
Or like the house in between when the chandelier was moving, and you were like, there's no explanation for this thing moving. Like there was nothing environmental that was causing it.
Yeah. I think a lot of debunking can come across as not believing or being skeptical, but I think that so many of us who love the paranormal are trying to debunk as much as possible so that we can really truly believe in the thing that we find.
Well, yeah, it's critical thinking.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, let's critically analyze everything legitimately and scientifically, and then go, okay, well, that's not, that's not happening.
Yeah.
So, Bethany, I believe you had an amazing question for Steve. Yeah.
So, and I'm not trying to like put you in a corner, and we will obviously also heavily. You are in a corner. I can see
you're literally in a corner in a beautiful library. By the way, we'll talk about that
Stunning.
too. Yeah.
And by the way, we edit this podcast, so if you don't want to answer this question, you don't have to. But as a paranormal investigator, you are obviously a believer. We are obviously believers. But is there something that is even too much for you to believe in? Like, are there? Like for me, I believe in Bigfoot, but I kind of draw the line at Loch Ness, for example. Which
why, Bethany?
Right? Because I feel like Bigfoots are like, they exist between different dimensions, and it's just really they slip in and out, all the time.
Well, is it because the Loch Ness is too big?
The Loch Ness is far too large, and it just is frightening. So, is there something like that for you, where like you'll believe in fairies, but my God, the idea of a whatever is a little bit too far?
Yes. Everything. I mean, I'm open to anything, but I don't believe in anything that I haven't seen or experienced myself. And I think that is important, with most investigators. And I think most investigators that I know are the same, Jay, Tango, Sherry, they trust me, love me, Jay trusts his life, the same. Tango, my best friend, but even still, I just had this experience. Okay, awesome. But let me go with you.
Sure.
It's one of the reasons we try not to investigate alone, because if you don't document it, now it's just your story. Maybe you've misinterpreted something. We try not to, because we have a lot of information in here as to ways to sort of disprove things in the moment that just happen automatically, so we're pretty good in that regard, but still we try to have someone else with us. Not saying it can't or won't happen, but UFOs kind of hard to believe in, but as more evidence develops and things come forward, I'm open to changing my belief. I think we'd be naive, and a bit narcissistic, if that's the right word, to think that we are amongst all of these galaxies, the only. So I do think there probably is something out there, but to have a firm belief, I don't know. I have a hard time with that. But then again, being a Catholic person with faith of some things that may be, how do you rectify or is that the right word? God, how do you reconcile that?
Reconcile. There you go. Yeah.
And I guess it's because I do believe I've seen the power of prayer work and that sort of thing. But as more things come forward, you do, develop new opinions and open to, and I guess that's science. That's the science side of what we do. There are some investigators, sure, who get beholden into some beliefs, but if you're a scientifically minded investigator, you don't want to be right, because then you're not learning. There's no advancement. There's no, you want to be open to learning. And if someone comes and, I'm happy to learn from them and I think that's important. But I don't like skeptics necessarily, no offense, because if you think of the skeptic, they have an agenda. They don't believe, and they don't want other people to believe either. So you're crazy, you're dumb, you're this and that, you're all of these things that, I'm not sure if any of that is true. Maybe the skeptic, but to be skeptically minded, I think is quite important.
I love that.
And how do you deal with the skeptics, and the naysayers and the people that no, wag their finger at you and say like, this is BS. Like, how do you still say, you could, when you're ready, you can come to us, and we'll embrace you with open arms. Like we'll always be here for you. How do you sort of deal with that, or any sort of backlash from the skeptic community?
It doesn't bother me at all.
Mm.
Quite honestly, I don't really think about it. I think it's sad to be so close-minded off to anything. You
Yeah.
could be holding yourself back, from some amazing life experiences. But I don't fault them for thinking that way. I have a hard time, saying I believe in ghosts. I've never seen one, not with
Hmm.
my own eyes, and do I believe in paranormal phenomena? Yeah, I've experienced a lot of crazy stuff that I can't explain. Nobody can explain. Have I seen ghost-like figures? Yes. But does that mean it's that quintessential ghost everybody thinks of? I'm not sure yet. But being open to all of that, they're not going to be. They're going to be very
Right.
closed off to all that. But to think uh, in that way, I think is quite important. You don't want everybody to be like, it's all true, it's all real. I think that's what keeps the non-believers scratching their head, like, is it? Like,
Well, yeah, and that goes back to like debunking as much as you possibly can
Yeah.
to try and, not necessarily prove, but
Present the facts.
Yeah, present the
Yeah.
facts and say, well, you probably think it's this. We tested this. It's not this. So
oh yeah.
it's this.
Even in the TV world, for those of us who have ventured into that side of things, even back in the very first episode of Ghost Hunters, when we started filming, I think it was in 2002 or 2003.
The OGs. You guys are the OGs,
well,
Yeah.
man.
Thank you. But even a lot of our crew, they're all skeptics. It's not like the film crew were paranormal investigators or people. They came from other TV shows. They're just, a show about, sure, I'll do. So not that they would make fun of us, but they would kind of, they're just in their camera world, and after the fact they're like, did you really, it's like, yeah. But it's not until they have, I mean, some are believers for sure, and some but there are a few who are like, I don't know about this, and then they have an experience.
Mhm.
We had one gentleman who had an experience, a few different crew members, and one that it really really jostled his brain so much that he quit. He left
Oh
the
my
show
gosh.
2 weeks later.
Wow.
Yeah, and after that, his sound bag went up into his face on a case. And, he was a pretty rigid dude. He was like, yep, my job, he was great. He was, and after that experience, he didn't want to be alone anymore. He didn't want to be in the dark. He had to be
Wow.
like in a hallway with all the lights on. Like he couldn't
Oh,
be.
wow.
Yeah, it changed him. And then I'd say maybe 2 weeks later or so, he was like, I just need to be done with this. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm picturing these like big Teamster Union guys, the gaffers and the cameramen, and they're like, this is bullshit. And then all of a sudden something happens, and they're like, dude, did you see that? Did you hear that? Like, did you ever have someone like in that side of the world, like on the production side, get excited and be like, oh my God, this happened to me?
Oh yeah, a lot. Yep. We have a few camera guys who are very, very much into it. And during one of the last seasons of Ghost Hunters, we had a sound engineer who, like, we heard something, and it was awesome. And then we saw this book sliding, and we ran over, and he was like sweating, and we're like, what? And he was like, and he took his headphones off, and he goes, me, this stuff, I don't really, he's like, but I heard that shit. It was right there. He was sweaty,
Yeah.
and,
Wow.
Yep.
not that he was into it, but we have a few camera operators who are recent, and our current director of photography, awesome dude, his name's Kenny. He gets excited, like,
Yeah. Yeah.
But, people have not a hard time understanding, but some people don't quite understand that, it's our job to document the paranormal stuff. It's their job to document us. So if
Yeah.
they get super excited and all of a sudden their camera shot is now they're in, they lock the show's over. There's no, so they can't really, um, you know,
You guys can get excited and they can't.
In my mind, what I saw,
right.
like as a filmmaker, the shot that I see is like the cameraman's so pro, he's being levitated and he's still holding the camera. Like, I gotta get the shot. I can't. And everyone's just pointing
floating.
at him. Yeah, he's just floating.
That can't happen.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I mean, we are not skeptics. We are believers. I was a UFO kid, so all the stuff coming out with UFOs is like wonderful to me. I'm like, I told you, and I keep saying like that. I think some of them are coming from the water, and I think some of them are coming from the sky, and like I think a lot of it could be interdimensional. Who knows? But now that everyone is finally going, hey, this exists, which sort of that also. I mean, I feel like that works for the paranormal investigation world too, is that this is like, yeah, we've been saying this too, guys. Like this stuff exists. We have proof. Is there anything that you have, let's say like scientifically from the tech that you use that is like, this is definitive proof? Like is it like an electronic meter or something that like just doesn't make sense other than the visuals that we see?
Unfortunately, there is no definitive proof. There's no way to reproduce, measure, or really deeply analyze anything. And science won't look at something in a way to definitively prove unless they can measure it, unless they get repeatability, and unless they can really, so no, there's nothing that I've ever gone to a physicist or, a high-minded person in that regard of, and they've been like, oh, yeah. It's always, no, this, some are very open to it, but some are, and one thing that they are starting to understand, though, is that you can look at the result of it. And there's that's not very much in the paranormal world, right? Because you see a ball moving or you see something moving 3 feet, whatever. Science, that's not real, but you can look at it as like, there is no way to really say scientifically that wind exists, but they know it does because they can measure the result. Yeah. They see the tree going sideways. So science is starting to try to look at the result of it, not necessarily what is creating it or their best guess is that if it is real, that it is just some sort of energy left behind, whether it's through radiation or thermal, or interdimensional. Most of them do believe, and when I say most, I'm saying the physicists that I've talked to, that we've talked to, that interdimensional or some sort of energy is still here. The fact of a human conscious being here in an ethereal form and having free will in the environment is still very much not accepted by any scientist. Yeah, sadly, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. There are a lot of things in science that didn't exist until it did. So.
What I've seen, I'm no expert, but from what I've seen, it's very tough to have consistency within the spirit realm or the paranormal investigations, because it's like each one does a different thing. Each one reacts a different way. There's no steady way. It's like, well, how did this person's spirit, react after death, and where did they go? What was the most familiar place they went? And that's going to change with every single thing. So it's kind of tough to say, well, this is the system at which they work, this is the result at which they work. So so I can understand why, but that's interesting. And now, speaking of tech, I'm a big tech guy.
You are. You're a real gearhead.
I love tech. I love gear. I love stuff. Do you have a favorite piece of tech that you use on investigations?
I do. I have, it changes for me a little bit every so often, but it usually flip-flops between an IR camera and a thermal camera, or a full spectrum camera and a thermal. camera. And the only reason really is, well, one, you have documentation of
Mhm.
the experience, which I think is a little more valuable than an EMF or something else like that. Um, Thermal is very is or isn't. You know,
Mhm.
if you go through the proper safeguards and you know it's not you or someone else's thermal heat reflection, it's pretty definitive in an investigator's eyes. A scientist would have to be there with you and observe the environment, but for an investigator, that's pretty solid evidence. um, and what I like about IR or full spectrum is not only can you see the visible spectrum, but now you can also see the infrared spectrum. If
Mm.
you're using full spectrum, which full spectrum isn't really full spectrum, there are a few spectrums in there, but now you can see some ultraviolet, and some other spectrums. So you don't always know if it's a visual phenomena, what light spectrum it's in. Maybe it's in all of them, who knows?
Right.
But we do see evidence that some show up in just infrared spectrum, but not in the visible spectrum. Some show it visible, but not in the infrared. It's kind of, but at least you have that. And then with an IR camera, you also have the ability to record audio. So
Hell
you
yeah.
are getting that type of evidence and backup as well. So for me, that's best bang for the buck piece of gear. Until we can get every spectrum, that would be super duper awesome. But I don't even know if they know. We know the visible ones,
Mhm.
obviously. There's that famous Roy G. Biv is how,
Yeah.
red,
Yeah, yeah.
orange, yellow,
Yeah.
blue, indigo, and violet,
Yep.
right? So
Yep.
so there we have all the visible spectrum, but uh, the what we can't see is where it could be quite interesting.
What's the coolest thing you've seen with these cameras that you've captured? Is there one that sticks out?
Yeah. Oh gosh, yeah. There was at the Crescent Hotel,
Mhm.
which is in the book, Crescent Hotel. There's a story about, you know, one of the stories took place, but you can see, what we think is an apparition or some thermal signature. And it seems to acknowledge as we move by it, and it was nobody there in the room. We tried it, and even when the cameras were done filming, we went. Uh, we were there for a week, 2 weeks, I think, straight. So we were always trying to figure out what it could be, even when we weren't. We were just always there. Like, what could it have been? Like trying to see if it would happen again. Um, and that was awesome. At Waverly Hills, we did catch a lot of thermal anomalies. We had a show Ghost Nation,
Mhm.
Yeah,
where
yeah.
we actually caught what I believe to be the manifestation of a manifestation, which sounds interesting or like, well, isn't that? But it did look like, you have, say, I don't want to say apparition because you'll think a person, that
Sure.
visual, but say an anomaly, and you see the manifestation of that anomaly. And that's not something I'm not sure really was ever captured on video. And we caught that in the infrared spectrum. It wasn't visible to the naked eye,
Jeez.
which is interesting. So it
Mm.
did, and it looked like what you would imagine if you could see energy in flux, just sort of coming together to form something. It was very, very interesting, very fascinating, and super cool. So there has been a lot of really, I mean, we've caught what I believe and to be full-bodied apparitions, the kind that you would think of as being a person who was once here living, walking, doing their thing as if they were alive, and that to me is, how?
Yeah.
But then again, does it mean a ghost? Does it mean it's there with a conscious doing and hey, or is it just energy somehow that's been zapped here, trapped here? Who knows? And I'd like to think that it's likely that there's both.
God, it just
You
makes you
know,
wonder what we're walking through
I
all the
know,
time.
I know.
Like, you're walking at the grocery store and there's
Yeah.
just a person
Yeah,
that you just
yeah.
go right through.
Yeah. And we just moved out of New York City to the country a year ago. We're in upstate New York, and I feel like there's a lot of haunted places up
All
here.
over.
We'll pass like dilapidated houses, and there's like old hospitals and stuff. So I feel like this is the place to go.
Yeah.
This is the place to be. But it's oddly the place that I feel the safest and most comforted. Before we get into a little bit more of the book, I did want to ask you, in regards to tech, you did work with Ed and Lorraine Warren, and they used very different type of tech. It was very old analog tech when they started. Is there a piece of equipment from the past that still works well to this day in terms of paranormal investigating?
There is. I think most of the tools and that investigators, when they first started getting into the gadgets, a lot of them still do work. EMF is been around for quite some time, 60s or 70s, in terms of investigating paranormal phenomena, and we still use that to this day. Before that, they were likely to use a compass, and some still do. I know some investigators who carry a compass with them.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen them when their batteries run out, they're not running back to center command. They're pulling their compass out. And hey, it works for it. The analog recorder is still very much a thing, and maybe it does. I had a sound engineer tell me once that on those analog tapes, there's a whole bunch of filaments that are sticking up, and
Yes.
they're pressed down systematically, and that's how you're in bands recording it.
Yeah.
And that's how the sound is created. And they had the thought that, or I guess you'd call it a theory even, that maybe there is a way that those filaments are pushed down to create sounds. And so maybe those analog tapes do have a few different or extra ways to capture, but I find that a little hard. Like, I don't know how, I don't know how I could figure it out not being a ghost. I'm just going to push this down to say hello.
It's the engineers who have died who can do it.
Yeah, it's the sound engineers. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe that's actually a good point. You connect it that way, and maybe that is true. But I do know some investigators that still use the analog recorders.
Yeah.
Isn't there a specific Sony recorder, like
there's a digital one?
That's like known for being better than the rest?
Yep, absolutely.
They're like
$10,000. We looked one up on eBay. We're like, let's get one, babe. And then I look it up and I'm like, no, we don't get that kind of money yet.
They are expensive. They become like a thing now. To be honest, I've never used one. I don't know that it would be more. I don't know how it could be unless it's tuned into more frequency and signal. But then I feel like it would be more open to even getting some disruption in different ways. But it seems like there are some investigators that claim that it is getting repeated, success. They're getting repeated success with that device. Hey, if it's working and they have all the proper safeguards to make sure that it's not some sort of contamination, that's awesome. The more real evidence we can get, the more we can recognize patterns and try to figure things out.
Amazing. I love a conspiracy theory, and I feel like I've heard the conspiracy theory with that digital recorder. And correct me if I'm wrong, and you've heard other, but that I think it's a Sony recorder. Am I right? Is it Sony?
I believe so.
I think it's Sony, and
it's an old Sony.
Sony, somehow they created this recorder, and then they got feedback that they were catching ghosts on it, and they didn't want that to happen because it would blow everyone's mind. So Sony killed that recorder. That's the that's the conspiracy theory. It all got too real for them. Yeah, that's probably not the case, but boy, I love that idea.
It is a great, big corporation, government conspiracy. I think it'd be more likely that they would maybe patent it and say, "Hey, we can talk to ghosts. Like, here you go, NASA. Here you go.
Yeah.
All these,
great point.
Yeah.
I mean, it would be the discovery.
Right. Yeah. That's like the discovery of the century.
Totally. So. You work all the time. You used to be, I almost said on tour, on the road, like 10. Well,
I mean, it is kind of like on tour, yeah.
You obviously have to disconnect and turn your brain off sometimes. We previously spoke to the horror director Robbie Banfitch about, his work and what he's done, and he's said he loves The Real Housewives because it's a completely different than like covering people in blood, which he normally does.
Yeah, he did a great movie called The Outwaters. I highly recommend it. It's great.
Do you turn to anything that people might be surprised that you're into to sort of just detach from work and let your brain kind of flow?
Yeah, like, I mean, you're a drummer in a death metal band called Perpetual Doom, which is awesome. I'm a huge
badass.
I'm a huge fan of death metal, and like I grew up in the hardcore scene in New York City, so like, Man is the Bastard is one of my favorite bands. Like, so that led naturally to death metal and stuff. So is it drumming? Like, what do you do to unwind?
I do like drumming, yeah. Not so much anymore to unwind. If I really want to just unplug, it'll be movies, TV shows, video games, a hike. I love going for walks and just exploring. Like if I need to get out, I'll go for a walk. I'll explore a little town, go through little back roads and shops, and get lost into some little alleyways and find fun little restaurants, and I'll unplug for a couple of hours. Anything to just reset my brain, but movies and probably video games would be the.
Well, can we talk about video games? Yeah.
Yeah. What's your favorite video game right now?
Yeah. What are you playing right now?
Oh, right now I'm doing Dead Island 2.
Island 2. We need to get on that.
Yeah, we need to. We're playing Disney's Illusion Island.
Okay. Oh, is it good?
Dude, it's amazing.
It's great. It's sort of that classic. I see the Abbott and Costello in the background.
Yeah.
Wait, is that no? It's Laurel and Hardy. Sorry, I see the Laurel and Hardy in the background.
Yeah.
So if you appreciate that, like sort of old school Disney animation, it's that. Because it's weird. Like we have to shut our brains off. We live the spooky life as well. Yeah. So like sometimes we'll shut our brains off with. We'll watch like scary YouTube stuff, but then we'll play like the most non-horror games.
And Disney's Illusion, because I'm not a Disney adult.
Neither am I. I'm not. But are you?
You're gonna love this then.
You're gonna love Illusion Island.
Blind singer, DVC member, the whole thing. Sorry. Go on.
It's low pressure. If you're playing with multiple people and they get hearts for more life, you also get the same hearts for more life. Yeah. There's no time limit. You're just like bip-bop booping around a world.
It has this sort of open world yet side-scroller
but it's a side-scroller.
Vibe. Yeah, and it also like the music is whimsical. It's that classic Disney. Like every time we play it, I'm like, I'm ready for Christmas. Like I feel like it's Christmas now.
You should definitely get on it. Yeah, you'll love it.
It's great to unwind.
I'll check that out.
And it's fun if you want to play with. If you want to play with multiple people too, it's it's really fun playing with folks. Yeah.
Was there anything else you wanted before we bestow?
I think we touched on everything.
Okay.
So let's just talk before we bestow upon you a very special honor that look, we know that you're a big deal in the paranormal investigating world, okay? Mm-hmm. But we've got a little name for ourselves too. But first, I want to just say, A Life with Ghosts is coming out on August 22nd of 2023. Is there anything that you want to talk about with the book before we wrap things up?
Yeah, I think people might really like the stories that are in there. There are a few different sides to it. It's not just these are your scary ghost stories. Most of them are location based, but it's just that's where I had that epiphany, that experience, that thought, that moment in time happened there. We also have to remember that they were people too. All these ghosts that were having fun.
Yeah.
They have lives and loves and losses, and let's keep them in mind too. So we do touch a little on the history and the backstory of the people involved that we're chasing after. But yeah, thank you. August 22nd. It'll be out.
Available everywhere? Available
everywhere. Yeah,
everywhere.
Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, all those bookstores, and Amazon, of course.
But go support your local bookstore.
Yeah.
Go support your local or your Barnes & Noble, or go and get the physical copy. We love, we see that you're sitting in a library. For those who are listening, for those of you who are watching, you can see the library that Steve has behind him.
Your library,
we have a library too.
Is the same color as our library.
Yep.
It's like that sage green, right?
And don't think I didn't see those Time Life books down there. I got the same ones.
Yeah.
Yep. I got all of them, man. They're great.
Wow.
I could see, I know that spine from a mile away. Now, before we wrap things up, Bethany and I have we've started our own illustrious paranormal investigating.
We've gone out exactly one time. So we
Okay.
are now experts.
Only available on our Patreon.
Yep.
Yes.
And so, most ghost hunters like to ghost hunt at night because that's when like you get the least contaminated evidence. But we get super sleepy.
Yeah.
So we have ghost hunted during the day, and we call ourselves the day hunters.
The day hunters.
The day hunters.
The day hunters.
And we have two members. One of them is Dennis, and one is myself.
But we're illustrious in
And-
our own minds.
We would now, Steve,
We would like to present to you this honorary badge with your, you can't really see it. I'll close up on it in the edit. But we have your photo here, and it says the Day Hunters, Steve Gonsalves, honorary member. And it does say in the back, the holder of this card can officially ghost hunt during the day and get to bed at a decent hour, signed Dennis Cahlo and Bethany Watson. So we will send that to your reps so you can put it somewhere in your home, maybe next to, some of the more illustrious things that you own or were bestowed upon you. But we are now making you probably think the only honorary member,
the only one worthy
of our ridiculous crew. So welcome. Steve.
Welcome.
Wow. Thank you. That is quite an honor. Thank you. And I will always say I was number one.
Yeah. You were number one.
Yeah. And there is a
That's
hole
right.
in the badge for a lanyard.
Yes.
So you can walk around.
Now, we're not saying that you should wear this on the show, but I'm just saying, like, maybe just put, it could be nice to be like, hey, guys, you know what? I got this. So
I'm getting in on the ground floor. Steve
you. That's actually really
Gonsalves.
it's a thank you for taking the time to talk to us and for checking in with us.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to say before we go, where people can find you?
Yeah. Steve Gonsalves official on all that social media stuff. I'm out there spreading the word about ghosts and what we're all up to. And thank you for having me. You guys are awesome, super fun to talk to. Continued success with everything you're doing. And tell your kitty cat I said hello.
Same to you. And thank you so much for joining us and taking the time to check in.
Of course, my pleasure.